Every day we fight is XCOM meets Edge of Tomorrow, where you fight, you die, and you come back and try again. Not in the figurative sense, but literally, because that's the whole premise. A group of underprepared civilians find themselves stuck in a Groundhog Day alien invasion, repeating the same day over and over while trying to get it right. There's no Tom Cruise or Emily Blunt, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when you're in the live, die, repeat cycle. It's a turn-based tactics game that doubles as a roguelite, featuring FPS mechanics woven into the combat system. The whole experience manages to be bleak, chaotic, and sometimes weirdly hopeful all at once. And it might just be one of the smartest takes on tactical combat we've seen in years. You play as the last resistance in the city of Rugosa, where aliens called Rifters have trapped the entire city in a time loop that resets every time you die. You're not the military or some elite tactical unit, you're a scientist, a conspiracy theorist, and an ex-combatant who's trying to do something useful for once in their lives. The game doesn't hand you tutorials or gentle introductions, instead you get trauma and a crash course in improvisation. This isn't designed to be a power fantasy where you gradually become an unstoppable force. It's a long, desperate crawl from complete incompetence to barely functional competence, and that's entirely the point. You're not meant to win clean victories or execute flawless strategies, you're meant to adapt, die a little smarter each time, and slowly fail your way upward. Instead of receiving missions from some sterile briefing screen, you climb out of a sewer and decide where to go in the open city, with the game leaning heavily into exploration and scavenging as core mechanics. You plan ambushes, scout locations, and most importantly, combat doesn't start until you decide to start it. This feels refreshing in a genre that usually forces encounters. The real-time exploration phase is limited in scope but remarkably effective at creating a sandbox experience within clearly defined boundaries. You pick a district, wander around the area, break into buildings, scrounge for gear, choose your fights, and then commit to them. This simple setup gives the entire game its fundamental shape and rhythm, because you control the tempo of engagement, which also means that when everything inevitably goes wrong, you have no one to blame but yourself. Once the fight begins, it shifts into tactical turn-based combat, but instead of relying on dice rolls and vague percentage hit chances, you aim and shoot manually in first-person perspective. Each bullet matters because you're the one pulling the trigger. Hit detection is based on actual geometry rather than random number generation, and when you miss, it's your fault rather than the game's. Think Valkyria Chronicles, but with sharper execution and more tactical depth. You can blow holes in walls to create new sight lines, pop shots through windows, catch enemies as they retreat, or set up devastating kill zones if you position correctly. Cover and line of sight matter, but patience matters just as much, because enemies will react to your actions and move around to expose themselves if you wait for the right moment to take your shot. This mechanic completely eliminates the old 95% chance to hit but missed anyway meme that has plagued the genre for decades. You can't blame the RNG for your failures. Now you can only rage at your own poor aim instead. Before any bullets start flying, positioning becomes the most critical element of success, and you don't get a pre-placed grid with designated starting positions. Instead, you sneak into combat zones and place your team members strategically, put your sniper upstairs for elevation advantage, slip your close combat specialist through the alley for flanking opportunities, set up the perfect ambush and then spring it. Or completely botch the execution and scramble to salvage the situation. The game rewards careful setup and punishes hasty decisions, but if you mess everything up, that's fine, because the loop resets and you get to try again. The game teaches through punishment rather than hand-holding tutorials, and that approach will bother some people, but this isn't strategy on rails, it's trial by fire, again and again, living that live, die, repeat cycle until you get it right. The roguelite loop is where the game gets genuinely interesting, because each run starts you off with different gear, perks and loadouts that force you to learn what works through repeated failure. You fail, you keep some progress, and over time your squad unlocks skills and upgrades that make you incrementally better, though the improvement comes slowly and feels earned rather than handed to you. The most unsettling aspect is that you'll encounter your own corpses from previous runs scattered around the city, the last versions of yourself that didn't make it. It's grim and effective, making every small gain feel genuinely earned rather than inevitable. You're also hunting Rift leaders through boss fights that advance the loop when you manage to beat one. Get to the end and maybe you'll break free from the cycle, but don't expect mercy from these encounters, because the aliens are fast, brutal, and considerably smarter than they initially appear. You're not playing heroes or chosen ones, you're playing survivors who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's Leopold, the paranoid old man who was right all along about the conspiracy, Vivian, the coma patient with secrets she's not sharing, and Dylan, the ex-soldier carrying enough baggage to fill a transport truck. They all talk like people who've seen too much and slept too little, which feels authentic rather than forced. The writing stays subdued throughout, with voice acting that's decent without being remarkable. There's no Marvel-style quips or lengthy monologues explaining the plot, just tired people trying not to break under the pressure of repeating the same horrible day over and over. A low fog hangs over everything, creating an atmosphere that's quiet and bleak but never oppressive. The tone carries the entire experience without needing musical swells or glory shots, just slow creeping pressure that builds throughout each run. The game includes crafting, modding and skill trees, along with the ability to chain special moves that trigger off your team's reactions to create devastating combinations. It's deep enough to reward experimentation, but doesn't bury you in spreadsheets or force you to memorise dozens of interacting systems, because everything earns its place and there's no dead weight cluttering up the interface. The gear you find, the perks you unlock, the traits your squad develops all feed back into the loop in meaningful ways. You keep just enough progress to matter between runs, but not enough to coast through encounters, which prevents the snowballing effect that ruins many roguelites. It's the kind of design that pushes you to play better rather than just optimise harder, which is increasingly rare in a genre that often rewards spreadsheet warriors over tactical thinking. The visuals can be inconsistent across different areas, with some environments looking rough or unfinished while others show genuine polish. Animations can be stiff during certain interactions, and while the aliens are visually interesting, they sometimes feel disconnected from the world they're supposed to be inhabiting. There are still some rough edges, UI bugs, pathing quirks, and the occasional hiccup you'd expect in a pre-release build. That said, the devs are clearly on it. I reported an issue by email and it was fixed in the code the same day. If that level of response continues through early access, most of these problems won't last long. The city map system, whilst conceptually smart, might become repetitive if it doesn't scale in complexity as you progress through multiple loops. That's the eternal danger with roguelites. Familiarity breeds fatigue, and once players start seeing the same encounters and layouts repeatedly, the magic starts to wear off. Every Day We Fight represents a bold rethink of turn-based tactics that scraps the genre's traditional safety nets and hands you something raw and uncompromising. It's small scale but remarkably dense, messy in execution but clearly intentional in design. The experience is brutal but never feels unfair, and underneath all the death and repetition there's a weird sort of hope. Not necessarily in the story being told, but in the act of playing, losing, restarting, and trying again with slightly more knowledge than before. If you're tired of hand-holding tutorials and predictable mission structures, this one deserves your attention, assuming you can handle the frustration of learning through repeated failure. Every Day We Fight launches into early access on July the 10th, and if the developers can smooth out the rough edges, it could become one of the most important tactics games in years. Until then, get ready to die repeatedly and come back smarter each time.